Hello and welcome to the programme. Now, over the past 5 years, Ukraine has shown stable progress, striving to be perceived as a more business-friendly country. The Ukrainian government, together with the business community, has been working on implementation of much-needed reforms, which have really contributed to the overall rise in the business sphere. So what has been achieved so far and what remains to be done to develop businesses in Ukraine? Now, to talk more about this, we are joined in the studio, I'm pleased to say, by Iaroslav Gregirchak. He's the Deputy Business Ombudsman in Ukraine. Hello, thank you so much for coming into our studio.
Pleasure to be here, Tom.
So, can you firstly give us a review of 2018? How has the business climate changed in Ukraine? And perhaps a more general question, what would you recommend going forward? What are the key steps do you think that both the government and other organizations can take?
Well, the business environment continues to evolve in the positive direction, I guess, not in the revolutionary but evolutionary way, as I said the other day here. And indeed, we have seen some evident improvements in several sectors that are worth mentioning. And I will do so by walking you through some of the areas where we have written our systemic reports about. We have seen the adoption of the methodology for the calculation of the hookup tariff when businesses are getting hooked up to electricity. And that basically completes a comprehensive reform that has been undertaken with the adoption of the electricity market law. And anticipation is that this year will show the actual improvement in terms of how business perceives the practicalities of that. Sometimes once upon a time in the business life's exercise when you got to hook up your shop, your warehouse to an electricity grid. Second field is what we call or what is known as the abuse of powers on the part of the law enforcers. With the adoption of the Moscow Show Stop law, a so-called one, back in 2017. The last year saw the adoption of the Moscow Show Stop 2 that has strengthened the grounds for bringing officers of the law enforcement agencies to personal liability, and which has helped out businesses, but vesting them with the ability to challenge failure to observe reasonable terms on the part of the law enforcers that sometimes we see during the course of the pre-trial investigation. And we would like to see the improvement, a further improvement, and I guess the adoption of the Moscow Show Stop 3 is imminent in filling in certain gaps that still exist in this procedure for bringing in the officers of law enforcement to liability in order to ensure that the process is sufficiently smooth.
And I guess this is actually very important as well, because if you're a business owner and you see that perhaps no consequences for the law enforcement who act beyond the law, perhaps illegally, in some certain circumstances, this is incredibly important for other businesses who perhaps want to come in, especially from abroad.
Well, you're absolutely right. And what we would like to see here, and that's something that determines the quality of legislation, is its preemptive effect, right? If there will be a certain reasonable degree of fear, let's put it bluntly, at the part of those law enforcers that might have abused their discretionary authority in the past, when they would be aware that from now on, and it's actually the change that has occurred, it's not only the existence of the verdict in the criminal proceeding, but the fact of them being brought to disciplinary liability that's right now constitutes the sufficient ground for the state to seek reimbursement of damage caused by their actions or inactions. And this was something that was missing and was attended to last year. Well, we would like to see this as something that would ultimately trigger the decrease in the number of individual complaints that would be filed with us.
And how is the trend actually with this new legislation that was brought in? Have you seen a decrease in the number of claims which are being made?
Well,
that you know of, at least.
The answer is that indeed the quality legislation, once adopted, should ostensibly result in the decrease of the number of complaints on the merits of that legislation. For instance, and that's something that has occurred, and I'm gradually moving towards the third area, which is the administering taxes. In 2017, the government has made a very effective effort to ensure that the current or the ongoing VAT is properly refunded. And it was appealing to see, and I'm glad to acknowledge and confirm that what has been tackled and changed back in 2017 has proved to be continuously, smoothly working throughout the entire 2018. And that's exactly what the one might observe as the consequential effect of the quality legislation. Now, in the context of law enforcers, the good example to prove the quality of the legislation adopted, and this is indeed illustrated itself quite well throughout 2018, is the effect of the Moscow Show Stop 1, which has introduced the mandatory video fixation of searches, special procedure for the seizure of digital data and hardware, mandatory access for advocate at any stage, mandatory audio recording of all those instances when law enforcers are approaching investigatory judges seeking ruling which would authorize search as an investigatory action. And the good thing is that we have virtually ceased to observe individual complaints which could be filed on the merits of specifically of this Moscow Show Stop 1. And in terms of our expectations for the current year and onward, indeed, to the extent these preconditions for bringing to personal liability as described in the Moscow Show Stop 2, which has become effective only a couple of months ago, effectively. Indeed, our expectation is that we will see the smaller number of individual complaints on the merits of those
so really it's a process of getting credible evidence, of actually having the proper documentation when these businesses go to court or go to the prosecutor, then they actually have potential evidence on their side. Whereas, I mean, you speak to a lot of business leaders and opinion makers. What are their concerns, and perhaps what are their views on business going into 2019? Do they think it's getting easier to do business in Ukraine?
Well, what I might recall from the top of my head is the quick review that has been made among the audience of the American Chamber of Commerce membership when they have held their membership meeting. To
and you were
appoint
there?
The new board of directors. I was there just as the attendee. American Chamber of Commerce is the part of our supervisory board. And what I can recall is that probably 2/3 out of the membership of this particular business association anticipate certain elements of growth in terms of their digits, their figures, their presence in this country when it comes to 2019. All in all.
Yeah, it's actually funny because in the past I've spoken to a few business leaders here myself when I've been at different conferences, and they have a difficult position because they don't want to talk too much about Ukraine because then their competitors might know to come here as well. So what they're trying to do is keep it secret. But
it's an interesting approach because indeed, if you were to be sort of to cross the line, which is very thin about being overly optimistic, then that might bring in more competition, or that might sort of relax the governmental officials to the extent that they would start believing that everything is very well and nothing needs to be tackled. But this is certainly not the case. And indeed, the fourth area where we have drafted systemic report, and you nicely mentioned competition, is indeed protection of economic competition and the oversight, where going forward we expect the ultimate adoption of the national program for the protection of competition and adoption of certain pieces of legislation that are very important to make the manner in which the MCU is exercising its authority in a more in a manner which is more coherent with the best international approaches.
And in normal English, what is the protection of competition? What does that actually mean for businesses?
That means the level, ground, fair playing field.
So we're talking about taxes. So we're talking about other unfriendly business practices, you could say.
It's quite a complex and comprehensive notion, of course, but competition is, when it's on a proper level, is aimed at ensuring that those that are producing and are operating in a fair manner are capable to deliver their product, and those that are consuming are vested with the opportunity to choose a particular product that they wish out of a certain array. Yeah, that's also the matter of choice for the customer, and that's also kind of an ultimate test on the other side of this paradigm, of this dilemma.
So it benefits everyone in the end.
That's supposed to be like that. To be like that.
Well, that's a good note to end the interview on. Thank you so much for coming in. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
That was Iaroslav Gregirchak. He is the Deputy Business Ombudsman in Ukraine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more on UATV.